Hey there riders, Moto Journo Kris here. Today I'm at the Yamaha MT launch for 2021. It's all the models, but I've got to say the focus is on that MT-09 and the SP version. It's basically a totally new motorcycle and they have heavily updated it pretty much in every way imaginable. The brakes I think are one of the few things that are the same as far as those calipers and the rotors, but otherwise bigger engine, more torque, beautiful amount of torque. It's got a beautiful flow to it. It's been further refined than ever before. And I think where the old bike was a very motardy style machine, the new MT-09 is sportier. It's more nicely balanced. The suspension, similar, but you know, everything has just been done better. And I've got to say, they've kept the price down. These are 15.3 for the standard version, and it's just an amazing package. If you've ridden one of the previous bikes and you're interested in it, I would definitely recommend checking out the 2021 model because it is just taken to another level. And I think the price is so competitive that these are going to be the bike to be on this year.
So what's noticeably improved on the 2021 MT-09, keeping in mind this is an early impression? Well, basically everything. Anything not changed directly tends to benefit indirectly, and the feel and ride experience of this machine is quite the evolution from the last generation of MT-09. I think riders jumping from a stock original gen 2013 model onto one of these bikes in 2021 would struggle to believe they are even the same family, let alone model. People are complaining about the headlight, but honestly, in person, I don't have a problem with it. Add the optional smoke screen and I think the bike looks great, but that is of course a fairly subjective area. LED lighting all round is a win at the end of the day, as is the standard quick shifter which goes both directions, although I do have to say these are becoming really normal features. When it comes to performance and handling, the MT-09 is now seriously refined, keeping in mind the first generation was probably best described as a bit cantankerous due to soft forks and a throttle which could be very sensitive. Now the CP3 Triple was always great at its core and exceptional value, but the latest iteration has had enormous updates from the capacity increase through to the heavier crank, which helps smoothen power, and that torque really is incredible. You've got 4 power modes to help manage the throttle response, but I did find the fueling really good in conjunction with the engine braking and slipper clutch coming off the throttle, especially considering the open road portion of testing was in the wet and at times pouring rain. In the past, I'd normally keep the bike to the standard mode, however all the modes felt pretty much usable now, which may be a reflection of some of that time being spent on a private road with a surface you could only dream of out on our public roads. The Bridgestone S22 tyres were no doubt a big boon here, but overall the 2021 MT-09 felt planted, offering great feel, and there was a lot of confidence there with minimal effort required on my part. The bike wasn't making me work for it, instead it was natural and comfortable, very much letting me get into the groove of just riding. In comparison to the last MT-09, the new bike feels more like a sports bike with a tall set of bars. The bike is balanced front to rear and the front end is very planted, with the bike's weight carried very nicely. That translates to a more intimate front end feel, more neutral handling overall, and of course easier corner entry. Punching out of the corners is also much more controlled, as like running in on the brakes, the suspension is well supported at both ends. To be honest, I've always felt the Street Triple chassis was a touch point in the segment, and I'd say Yamaha is right there with it now. The MT-09 has adopted some of that mechanical, stuck to the road kind of feeling that the MT-10 is so well known for, but also feels lighter than the fairly solid 1000cc machine. If you're into corner carving, you're in for a real treat, as the updated frame and additional low to mid-range performance makes this a seriously thrilling machine to punt along even in wet conditions. Peeling into corners is effortless, with the bike responding to your thoughts. The MT-09 is thrilling, with the front fork setup impressive, while the rear only got a little harsh over some of the worst surfaces, keeping in mind I didn't even have a chance to adjust it. There was room for improvement there, but it may well be achievable within the standard settings, and this is a pretty normal observation from most machines I test just running stock settings, from this price range well up towards that 20k mark in Australian dollars. The brakes as well seem ideally suited to plenty of wet weather for the test, with gentle bite but good power as you increase the pressure, the new Nissan Radial Master cylinder being a point of note here. Obviously this isn't like some of the Brembo setups found on the pricier competition with high levels of initial bite, but at the same time I found it a well balanced system overall. Keeping in mind this is a dual 298mm rotor with Yamaha 4-piston radial calipers setup, and there was never a time that braking performance was lacking at the end of the day. It is also backed by cornering ABS, which thankfully I had no need to rely on. That, along with the fork setup, certainly made transitioning onto and off the brakes a flawless experience, especially into curves to wash off a little speed before getting on that throttle early to punch out the other side towards the next twisty. Yamaha noted that this was a point they worked on with the suspension updated to match the new frame, in minimising any seesaw effect from the front to the rear of the bike and vice versa, and it certainly felt very well tuned in that department for my 70 kilos of weight. The rear brake has a good bit of power and was easily modulated through the corners for control, although the torque-laden power delivery meant riding smooth was super rewarding, and that does suit my personal riding style rather than trying to chase crazy levels of trail braking into the corners, particularly in the wet. Yes, that is probably why I'm not that fast. One of the greatest features of the CP3 Triple is also that easy revving nature, which makes the use of the full rev range a pleasure. I wouldn't say there's an enormous kick like the MT-10 has at that spot in its rev range, however it revs through that range quickly and eagerly with strong ramping torque, making for accessible performance. Too accessible perhaps when you consider just how heavily policed our roads can be, and I'd say you could quickly find yourself at extreme speeds without realising it. Such is the ease of acceleration and the planted feel of that new chassis. You certainly don't need to rev the guts out of the MT-09 to have fun with peak torque at just 7,000 RPM, but you probably will because the induction howl and exhaust note has been tuned for a great ride experience and certainly adds to the mix, while there's no early power drop off there. It's no aftermarket exhaust, but with restrictions getting ever tighter, it's nice to see Yamaha tuning the bike for that audible aspect of things, plus they reckon they saved weight on the exhaust as well. The downward pointing belly exhaust apparently help with the audio track, but isn't the most sightly design I've ever seen, no doubt due to the additional catalytic converters required for Euro 5. The question I was left asking was whether blacking out the whole exhaust and header system would blend it more in with the bike. Yes, it retains much of the character of the previous triples with that sound, but there's more torque and fueling is more precise and still has good feel at the throttle despite going cableless and wireless. The seating position was great for me too, sitting in the bike with a slightly taller seat height and revised bar placement, not to mention taller risers, as the steering stem has dropped 30 mils, with the forks also shorter to suit without losing any travel. That's no doubt where the significant improvement in the handling comes from. After all, as your weight as a rider is no longer sitting kind of on the back of the bike and is naturally more further forward over that front wheel, with the angle of the engine also part of that revision. 825mm as a seat height is pretty normal for me at least, and I could easily get a foot down with a 32-inch inseam, with an upright commanding view down the road, which still delivers that much greater intimacy with the front end. Apparently there's some minor adjustments within the standard bars and pegs too, which you can do, so you can mess around a little there, but for me I could easily lock in between the tank and the pegs without getting the balls of my feet up onto those foot pegs. For casual sporty riding, that was ideal. Of course, I'm 180cm and fit on the bike is going to be a fairly unique proposition for each rider, so it's worth checking out how that works for you in person by checking one out in a local Yamaha dealer, of course. Obviously, there's no wind protection, and certainly the MT-09 suspension setup is much sportier than say the MT-07, without getting quite to the premium feel of the MT-10. Not that that's surprising, as the MT-10 is almost 50% more. With that being said, I think the loadout is commendable. The roughness from that rear shock was certainly fairly similar to what most bikes in that 700 to 900cc category, especially naked bikes, exhibit over poor road surfaces that are so common here in Australia and New South Wales. particularly on stock settings that haven't been set up for my specific rider weight, although I'd be interested to see how the MT-09 goes over my local roads, which I know pretty well, in the dry. Being a naked bike, the MT-09 offers a great sensation of speed and engagement, starting relatively low compared to a full sports bike. However, realistically speaking, with an IMU and cornering traction control and ABS, the latest version is offering a strong electronics package. Plus, you can just set the bike to mode 1 with traction control off if you want to go crazy and leave it all in your own hands. I love the idea of a do-it-all bike, which I think naked bikes are well capable of, and the 2021 MT-09 is a good representation of that. Commuting and filtering through traffic should be as easy as you could hope for, with great fueling and modes to soften things down if you're ever at all worried. For the weekend fun though, you've got an exceptional engine and chassis which will reward if you're having a bit of a hoon with mates, or if you head to your local twisties to have a bit of a crack, all within legal speeds of course. I toured on my old FZ6N and I definitely think the MT-09 will be a capable touring machine, although some accessories will probably be needed to add to the comfort factor here, like maybe a taller screen. Offering far more comfort than a sports bike with a bit more thrill factor from down low and in comparison to some of the more staid touring machines, and of course that's without going to the extra expense of something like the new Tracer 9 GT. Overall, the handling and ergonomics are the biggest improvement, but I think the updates to the engine are probably easy to miss as a result, while Yamaha seem to have ticked pretty much every box a rider could ask for. Full LEDs, TFT display, cornering functionality, good electronics package, super competitive pricing, continuing the SP version for those after something a little more special, and as far as future-proofing, Euro 5. Now the TFT could be a little bigger and fancier, I will admit, but there's not much else I can fairly criticise after those first few rides. Plus consider you've got 4 power modes you can toggle through on the run, plus if you'd like to access them through the dash, as well as traction control, cornering ABS, and slide control and lift control, with numerous settings for each of those. The roller wheel on the right bar offers access to that dash interface by clicking in to select or rolling through for your options, which is a really easy thing to use. On the left switch block in comparison, it's very easy with a mode button and toggles in either direction, so very simple and easy to use. But let me know what you think in the comments. Have you test ridden the new MT-09 yet? Do you like the styling and loadout? As always, stay safe out there and thanks for watching.